Hello, students. This is the second video lecture that I'm doing for the module on television. And during the first video lecture, you may have been thinking, when is this old man going to talk about streaming? Doesn't he know that everyone streams their video content? We're going to talk about streaming. But before we get into streaming, I want to continue to explain the way things used to be so you can better understand the disruptions caused by streaming. Okay, that's why we're spending so much time talking about the way things used to be, so you can understand the disruptions and maybe some of the implications. All right, here we go. The first major disruption I want to talk about is how the size of the audience is calculated. And I'm going to spend a couple of slides here explaining the Nielsen ratings, which still have some currency at the current time. They're still used and you should still understand them, but we are moving into a different era. Okay, here is an excerpt from Hollywood Reporter. That is a trade journal from November 14th, excuse me. This is about a TV show, High Potential, which I've never seen. Okay, that doesn't matter. What it is saying is High Potential has a sizable lead among all non-sport and new shows, sports we'll talk about in a moment, in the key ad demographic 18 to 49. It averages a 2.42 rating over 7 days of viewing. A 2.42 rating over 7 days of viewing. That's what we need to explain. What does that mean? What does that mean? And viewership grows over time because people who time shift a show, who watch it later, are added into the Nielsen ratings. Why is 18 to 49 a prime demographic? The concept is that people under the age of 18 do not have much money. So unless you're targeting teenagers specifically with a product only for teenagers, generally, and kids are not really an audience, you target the parents to get stuff to buy for the kids. But pretty much the idea is that once you hit 18 or maybe early 20s, that's when you have money to buy stuff. Now, if you're over the age of 49, like I am, it is presumed you have already made up your brand loyalties. So even though people over the age of 49 typically have more money, inshallah, right? You want more money later in life, you don't want less money. You've already made up your mind, so you're considered less susceptible to advertising. Women are also considered very, very desirable as consumers because there's a concept. This might not be true. This might not be true. This is industry logic. Concept that women control the purchasing of the household. So if you can get a young woman in her 20s or mid 20s hooked on your product, as she grows, maybe gets a spouse, has kids later on, you're going to get all of that money as well. 18 to 34 is also a very desirable demographic because most of the trends, cultural trends, are set by younger people, and those of us over the age of 34 are constantly trying to act like we're younger. So 18 to 34 is a good demographic, but the prime main demographic is people aged 18 to 49. Now, in its most basic form, a rating is a percent. The most basic form of rating is a television household. Nielsen assumes that everyone has a television, or everyone who has access to the internet also has access to television. So even if your household or apartment or dorm, whatever, doesn't have an actual television, if you have access to a television signal in some way, you are considered a television household. So a rating of 2 is 2%. 2% of television households. A rating of 10 is 10% of television households. Now, the rating can also refer to people if you get an age demographic, right? I said 18 to 49. So if you said rating of 2.4 in 18 to 49, that is 2.4% of people aged 18 to 49. If I just said rating of 2.4 without the age, then it's households, okay? Now, share is similar. It is also a percentage, but we remove from the sample anyone who is not actively consuming television at that time period. Here's a way to explain that. What is the rating for Channel 2? 3 out of 10 homes. 3 out of 10 homes is 30%. Channel 2 would have a rating of 30. 3 out of 10 is 30%. Channel 2 would have a rating of 30. Now, what is the share? What is the share? Exactly same data, but now we want to know the share. We remove those 4 monopoly homes that are not watching TV. Maybe they're out at the club. Maybe they're listening to music. Who knows what they're doing? They're doing something else. So we remove them from the sample. So now our sample is actually only 6 homes. Of the 6 homes, half of them are watching Channel 2. That's a 50 share. That's a monumental share, 50 share. 50 share, that means of the televisions that are in use at that time period, half of them are watching your program. That is what we mean by share. Now, what is the purpose of audience metrics? The ultimate goal, which does not yet exist, but the ultimate goal would be some type of system that tracks all of your media consumption, maybe even the print product or a newspaper, what music you listen to, what TV you watch, what webisodes you watch, what movies you watch, everything. But then it could correlate that with your actual purchases, say at the grocery store or department store. Now, it would be mind boggling to have that level of data, but that is ultimately what advertisers want. So that if I were coming out with a new suntan lotion, a new type of golf club, a new type of car, I could know with mathematical precision the people who are most receptive to this new product, what is the media that they are consuming, and that's where we put our ad. So again, this type of system does not yet exist, but this is ultimately what advertisers would like to go for. Now, to figure out what television is being watched in the United States, you do not have to ask every single person what they're watching. That would be impossible. So it's a sample that you extrapolate from. You take a sample and then you extrapolate from that. If there's 350 million people in the United States, or whatever it is, I don't know how many potential television viewers are in the United States. It's somewhere in that range, 350 million people. Maybe you only have 30,000 people in your sample, but then you can multiply, use math to say, if 10% of the sample is watching the show, then that would be X number of people across the entire United States. Some of the information comes from electronic devices. These are devices that are sometimes worn on a person. They use an audio signal to detect what television or radio station, similar technology works for television and radio, or it could be something attached to your TV that actually monitors automatically, or it could be a diary, a literal paper diary, where people, if you're asked to be in the Nielsen sample, you just write down what television shows you watch. Sometimes people aren't honest. Maybe they don't want to admit that they were watching a sleazy reality show. They want to say, I was watching an informative documentary about the plight of Gaza, because I don't want you to know I was watching a sleazy reality cooking show. Or people forget as well. So diaries are unreliable in that way, but they're very, very cheap. Just mailing out thousands or hundreds of thousands of paper diaries is much less expensive than getting a couple hundred electronic devices out there. So that's the trade-off. That's the trade-off. You have a larger sample, but maybe your data is less reliable. Nielsen, that's the company. I've already talked about them a few times. Nielsen, that's the company that's the dominant virtual monopoly when it comes to audience ratings for electronic media. Nielsen Radio Index started in the early 1940s. A guy named A.C. Nielsen, that was actually his name, he put a device called the Autometer in homes. It was only in 800 homes. This was radio now, and it kept track. There was like a moving line, kind of like those things that indicate when an earthquake is coming. It moves a line on a piece of paper so that once a week, a technician could come in, and by looking at the piece of paper, they could tell what radio stations had been listened to just by the physical piece of paper. But when the technician also came into the home, they could also look around and say, did you purchase these products? Amos and Andy radio show was sponsored by Pepsodent toothpaste. They could check, presumably they got permission from the people. They could check, do you actually buy Pepsodent? So it's kind of funny that the ultimate goal of what modern advertisers are going for actually existed at the very beginning of early radio audience measurement, because they could match up quite clearly product purchasing with radio listening. I used to have a whole series of slides where I talked about the different changing of the literal technology that Nielsen used to measure television. Don't worry about that. Paper diaries are still used, but now the big thing is called PPM, portable people meter. It's either a separate device, very small, smaller than a phone, or maybe the size of an Apple Watch, that people wear, and through audio signals, it detects what television show is being watched. It's not like Shazam in that it automatically knows what the television show is, but there's a silent, almost like a hidden digital signal, a thumbprint, as it were, that's put in there by the producers so that when Nielsen gets that data, it knows, you're watching Stranger Things. So PPM is the electronic device that's used to gather television data now. Some more terms, just in case you should ever see these terms. Nielsen uses these terms. L plus SD means live plus same day. If you watch something when it aired or within 24 hours, that's considered live plus same day viewing. Live plus 3 calculates 3 days of delayed viewing if something is recorded on a DVR or watch streaming within 3 days. That's called the L+3, L+7. C3, now this is a ratings just for the commercial. When Nielsen calculates ratings, it's for the entire show, but then advertisers want to know how many people actually watch the commercial. Just in case you ever see the term C3, it refers to television ratings specifically for the commercials. And now this is a newer one. I just put this in literally. I've never used this term before. L+35. It's a newer metric that some of the streamers, excuse me. There you go. Fix that typo. L+35 is a newer metric that calculates 35 days of viewing. I don't know what the magic number is. The industry is trying to figure this out right now. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about streaming. And I asked Google Gemini to make me AI to make me this cartoon. And the AI threw in that caption. Oh no, our live plus SD is doomed. That means live plus same day, because streaming television is disrupting everything. And I just said 1950s nuclear family, and the AI made them all white. Just notice that. I didn't specify that, but that's just the way AI thinks. Okay, here's from November 2025. When you look at television content and where the traffic is coming from, this is according to Nielsen now, only about 23% is traditional over-the-air broadcasting. That's the old stuff, the original stuff I talked about. Only 20% comes from cable. 46% is from streaming. So not quite half, but the sizable chunk of content is now being streamed. And within streaming, you can see the different categories broken down here. YouTube is the leading player, and then Netflix. Amongst sort of traditional streaming companies, Netflix is the biggest player. Here we have some data from November 2025. Now, here's what I want to stress. It is so difficult to calculate the size of the audience with streaming, and because people can watch streaming shows on so many different devices, that they've given up. All that stuff I told you about ratings, percentage, and share, the industry is kind of giving up on that. Now they just calculate number of minutes that were actually streamed. The idea is that if a show streamed more minutes of content, then it had a larger audience. But then maybe this favors TV shows that have long episodes. I think some of the Stranger Things episodes are like 2 hours long or something absurd. Again, there's always ways to dispute this. But as of this data right here, for late November 2025, Stranger Things was clearly, and then you add a couple extra zeros there. What is that? Millions? Is that billions? That's a lot. That's a lot. Okay. And then Landman is big as well. Now we go to linear television. This is another term for traditional broadcast TV, where things are programmed according to a set schedule. For middle of December 2025, now it does have household rating here. This CBS NFL, whatever game that was, had a 13 household rating. That's 13% of households. And you could see it's all football right here. It's all football. And then they can calculate the number of viewers. Oh, that's 28 million viewers. Yeah, 21 million viewers here. Sports is considered incredibly profitable programming because that is pretty much the only thing people will watch live. You can't time shift a sporting event. If I want to watch the Sugar Bowl that was a few days ago, I know the result. So there's no point in me seeing Georgia lose again. Yeah, Georgia lost. So that's why sports and these companies pay ridiculous amounts of money. The cost to show sports and rights to different sporting leagues goes up exponentially. It's not going up according to the rate of inflation, because people will watch it. People will watch it. That's kind of keeping broadcast TV alive. So in conclusion, for this part of the lecture, ratings and shares are percentages. Remember, those are percentages. The information comes from a sample of viewers. It comes from a sample of viewers. You don't have to ask everybody what they're watching. Some of the information is from electronic devices like PPM. Some comes from paper diaries, and streaming platforms measure total minutes viewed, not viewers. To go back to the terminology we were using before, we are now into the post-network era. If originally we had sort of the network era and then this era of multi-channel transition, we're now in the post-network era where things are really being disrupted and there's so many different ideas that no one is quite certain what is the best way to deliver television, what's the best way to make money off of television. Over the last several years, we have seen the growth of various streaming platforms. These, I assume you know what I'm talking about here. This is something that uses the internet connected directly to your TV or to a computer or maybe even your phone, where you pay. It's not like paying a cable fee where you get all these different channels. You're paying for sort of like a select group of content that usually you watch on demand. So it's not constantly streaming, but you pick, oh, I want to watch this. I want to watch a rerun of Ted Lasso. I want to watch a rerun of Better Call Saul, whatever it might be. And each different company has its own little library of content. This seems to be the way we are evolving. Netflix has pioneered this form of distribution, and Netflix is the industry leader right now. We call this form of distribution SVOD, subscription video on demand. SVOD, subscription video on demand. Netflix originally started by doing reruns of old TV shows or movies. Then they start to create their own original content. House of Cards was the one that really established SVOD for new original content as the way to go. So binge viewing generally has kind of like a negative connotation. It kind of relates to couch potato concept. So people do prefer, consumers prefer binge viewing. The people who produce and release content aren't really fans of it. They would rather stagger the content and, you know, make you hooked for a longer period of time so you can watch more ads rather than watching everything all at once. But consumers tend to prefer binge viewing. SVOD is an acronym you should know. AVOD is another acronym you should know, for advertising supported video on demand. This is a growth area, okay? If different television companies or traditional legacy media outlets are suffering, AVOD is growing, okay? So as much as people say they hate commercials and hate advertising, this is the area of media that's growing, AVOD. And we have this interesting phenomenon. I think this is like history coming full circle. It's called FAST, free ad-supported streaming television. Now, I said most streaming platforms don't have sort of linear channels running. They're going in that direction. They're actually going in that direction, where if you go to one of these things like Pluto, I've gone to before, there's all these different sort of niche channels. It's only reruns of Love Boat. That's a show you probably don't remember, or Dukes of Hazzard, or something really insanely specific. I know Three's Company's there. It's just episodes of that show, and you can't rewind them or pick episodes. It's just streaming there. Commercials come in. It's like old-fashioned television, but this actually is a growth area, believe it or not. Free ad-supported streaming television does seem to be a big growth area. Okay, finally, all of that, this is all that I've been telling you is a build up to these slides. How is streaming disrupting old TV practices? On one hand, streaming is a new market for syndicated shows. So it is a new place for television networks and production companies to sell their old episodes, including stuff that had no real value. Like no one was really watching Dukes of Hazzard. Now you got a place you could sell that stuff. There's a demand for more TV. The content demand is huge. We need more and more television to fill all these outlets. And they're making TV shows now of 6 to 13 episodes in a season. When I was a kid, 22 episodes was a season. That's why there's hundreds of episodes of Friends, because they were making at least 20, if not more than 20 episodes per season. We're making more TV shows, shorter seasons, but we're cranking out more of it. So in that regard, you could say streaming is a boon for television because it is motivating the creation of all this new content. But it's also competition. How are people going to watch the new stuff that's on broadcast or cable television when they can watch the old stuff on streaming? So it is competition as well. There's also this debate about how to release new content. Do you do once a week? If you put out a show once a week, you can maximize social media buzz. I got sucked into that show Empire because it was so big on social media. Then later I watched the on-air episode. That's literally what happened to me. Or do you put out all the episodes at once for people to binge? No one really knows what's the best practice here. Now, this is really specific now, and you understand because of all the information I've given you. Should a broadcast or cable TV network put its show online immediately after it airs on TV or hold it? If you hold it for at least 3 days, you can maximize that L+3 number. Remember that number? You can maximize the Nielsen ratings, then put it online. Or maybe consumers don't care after 3 days. Again, no one really knows the best way to handle this stuff. I'm going to talk about one failed experiment and then one successful experiment, and we'll be done, okay? This is about the disruption caused by DVRs and streaming and the new forms of technology. Okay, this is a failure. This is a failure considered a bomb. That's Jay Leno, who used to host the Tonight Show. Years ago, and again, this is like, about 10 years ago now, the industry noticed that the peak time for DVR viewing, when people would record shows and watch them back later, the peak time for DVR viewing was at night between 9, 10 o'clock at night. Kids have gone to bed. You've already washed the dishes or put the dishes in the sink. Now you can settle down. Now you can watch a serious show. So there's intense competition. Competition is at its peak around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. That's a very difficult time slot to program. So back in 2009, this is more, what is this, 15, 16 years ago? NBC, and I remember, I thought this was big at the time. NBC decides this bold experiment. They're going to give up. The NBC television network is giving up on the 10 to 11 o'clock time slot. They said, we're going to do a Jay Leno talk show, just him sitting at the couch, telling goofy bits, essentially a version of the Tonight Show, which he used to do later at night. We're going to do it 5 nights a week. It's incredibly cheap, very inexpensive programming, but the ratings were terrible. And remember the affiliate relationship. I showed this map. I'll show it again. The affiliates got very, very upset. And it was gone within months. It was gone within months because the local affiliates told NBC, hey, maybe this is cheap for you and you are saving money. You are destroying the television ratings for us, the local station. Nobody is tuning in to the 11 o'clock newscast because they've all tuned out because Jay Leno and a boring talk show isn't what people want. People maybe went to Netflix or put in a DVD, or maybe they started playing a video game and they didn't come back to watch the 11 o'clock news. The local affiliates make their money through news. So the Jay Leno experiment may have saved money for NBC, but it pissed off the local affiliates because they were not making money on their local news. That's why that experiment was a failure, but it shows the difficulties that the industry is having trying to adopt new forms of technology. Now, this is a success. Dancing with the Stars finale, whatever, the most recent finale, I don't know what season it was. I'm recording this at the beginning of 2026, but the last Dancing with the Stars finale, which is a very old-fashioned, incredibly old-fashioned show. It's like the Ed Sullivan Show. It's a very old-fashioned show. It did monster numbers. It did huge numbers. It was up considerably. Look at that. In the 18 to 49, it was up. The 2025 finale was up 89% from the 2024 finale. So despite the fact that linear television is said to be under attack, somehow ABC and Disney and all the people involved with Dancing with the Stars figured out how to make it a success. Why was it a success? I got a complicated slide here. This is in the lecture notes. You don't have to write it all down. It was on ABC, regular television. It was also on Disney Plus. So you got audiences, whether they watch streaming or whether they watched it on TV. They really, really embraced social media more professionally and more competently than probably any big television show has done so far. They really embraced, they were creating TikTok videos of rehearsals. They were having a whole social media team that was engaged in real time, posting stuff on Instagram and TikTok within seconds of a dance ending. And then I didn't realize this, they were actually choreographing dances to be viral and to make TikTokable moments. Okay. So social media was not an afterthought, but social media was a way to embrace it. It's old-fashioned television on an old-fashioned variety show, comes out once a week, but yet it does great numbers, both on social media, online, and also on regular television. Okay, that's it. There's going to be no, there's no more play pause it. You've already done. Yeah, I've already done 4 play pause it questions. Anyway, you're done. You're done. I know it's a lot of information. Look at the lecture notes. but maybe this will help you understand what you're seeing and why you're seeing some of the things that you're seeing on TV.